William Lawrence. He's a professor of political science and international affairs at American University. Professor, great to see you. Tell me, what do you make of this ruling?
It's historic. It's unprecedented. It went further than I thought it would. My largest concern, and not a lot of people know this, but I have a PhD in international law, although I'm not a lawyer. I'm a professor of political science and international affairs. But what I thought, if the court was going to try to dodge, they were going to dodge on a kind of technicality that South Africa hadn't done enough to try to resolve the dispute before taking it to the court. And they were categoric on this. I was surprised by the strength of some of the decisions. They basically called on Israel to stop all incitement. That's telling the Israeli government to shut up. That was unprecedented. I was surprised that they called for the end of all genocidal acts, which are much of what the Israeli military are doing. If you look at the full definition of genocidal acts, many of the actions the military are taking fall within the Genocidal Convention. I did not think they would go so far as to ceasefire, although they didn't articulate why. They did take a narrow interpretation to some degree of the Genocidal Convention, but courts often do that in order to make it a stronger decision that's harder to refute. And the fact that the Israeli judge went along with several of these decisions was very important. Only the Ugandan judge, I think, checking over the list of the name of the judge, was the one voting no. I have no idea why. And now it goes not only to the UN Security Council for implementation, which will put a lot of pressure on the U.S. and hopefully they'll get to at least an abstention like they did before in the next decision, which will add some teeth to this. But it helps Bill Burns in his negotiations in Europe for a new ceasefire, hostage exchange, and increasing humanitarian assistance, because he can say to the Israeli objections, look, you just lost in the court and you've got to work with me better than you've been working with me before. I don't know if the Biden case, in the U.S. court, which is very important, and this will affect it, will have much effect on Biden's positions, but a lot of these other things will, including this decision on his own actions. And now the case that the U.S. has been making privately to Israel since November, that this war needed to end by the end of calendar year 2023, the hot phase of the war, or in January, will become a stronger case, and the rift between Netanyahu and Biden will grow.
Now, Professor, there was some very strong legal language going on there, and I'm sure many were not able to understand what the president of the International Court of Justice meant when she used some very difficult legal words. I just want to take your thoughts on this. As I understand, the court did not use the word ceasefire, although it did say that it calls for the preservation of life in Gaza. So what's your reading here? What exactly did the court say about the ongoing fighting in Gaza?
It said basically that the Israelis are doing everything wrong. And it also told them to shut up with the reference to incitement in terms of encouraging their soldiers to do everything wrong as they've been doing. It's unprecedented. Yes, they didn't call for a ceasefire. Yes, your guest next to you is right in that respect. But in order to fulfill all of the actions required under the Genocidal Convention, you pretty much have to have most of the conflict stop in most places most of the time, and in most of the ways Israel's been doing it. Of course, implementing it is more difficult without a ceasefire, but the Americans want a ceasefire. They forced a ceasefire on November 24th and 2 extensions of it against Israel's preferences. And while the Americans, instead of ordering Israel to have a ceasefire, are trying to convince Israelis of a ceasefire, this helps their case in an important way.
But, Professor, this is what I fail to understand. The ICJ called for a ceasefire when it comes to Russia and Ukraine, even though the human suffering in Russia-Ukraine war was far less when you compare it to what's going on in Gaza right now. So, I mean, what's your assessment? Why do you think the court did not use the word ceasefire here?
To have a stronger decision on a narrow interpretation. So you might have ended up with 9 to 7 votes, things like that, which would then give Israel a platform, and others, maybe this Ugandan judge, I don't know what the position of the state of Uganda is, but those that are willing to back Israel, saying, look, you have a split decision, is barely in favor of all of these measures. What courts often try to do is create a sense of unanimity when they can, or near unanimity, that they're really following the letter of the law. I mean, the Genocidal Convention doesn't call for ceasefires, systematically or in all cases. Those happened in those previous cases, but you get an excellent set of arguments for a ceasefire from this decision, and you're getting 16-1 votes with the Israelis involved. That's very powerful. And then it has much more standing at the UN Security Council and internationally, and in particular with the Americans, who are the ones holding the golden key that can bring this war to an end.
Now, Professor, the court has announced some provisional measures. Along with that, the court has also asked Israel to submit a report. Can you explain this whole process to us? What happens from this point onwards?
Let me also just say quickly that the famous American lawyer Dershowitz said Israel should not have submitted to this ruling, and his argument was correct in the sense that Israel is highly embarrassed here and should be, and needs to take a bunch of actions, including preserving all evidence of genocide, meaning anytime they do anything, they are required to go in or let others go in, Palestinians, UN workers, and gather evidence of commission of crimes of genocide. And they have to give a report in a month of everything they did to stop the genocide. As I said a minute ago, the most important action is in Europe right now with Bill Burns negotiations. We will also have Security Council actions, and we will also have a whole set of international actions, other court cases, as your guest next to you said, which are important, but on a slower time scale. The ultimate finding of genocide will probably take 3 or 4 years, but that doesn't mean that Israel's been told, you're waging this war all wrong, you're taking plausibly illegal acts, and you must stop most of what you're doing.
Professor William Lawrence, it's always a pleasure talking to you, sir. Thank you very much for talking to us here on TRT World.